As you can tell from my voice, I really don't have a voice today. It is my biannual bronchitis come back. I am not contagious, but I could be. No, I'm not contagious, but I appreciate you putting up with what I have to offer today. I want to start with a question. Anybody here ever take any of those ancestry DNA tests? Okay. Where there was, I'm seeing one. Yeah, me. All right, Dave, were you excited about what you found? What did you find? Who are you?
I'm a quarter Jewish.
Mazel tov. Anybody else kind of excited about who they are when you did a DNA test? Yes. That's probably Mike.
Oh, yeah. Well, the interesting thing is what wasn't there.
Okay.
Cherokee wasn't there. And my great-grandmother was a Cherokee.
Or so she told you.
So did a lot of other people.
I too have Indian ancestry. I'm related to Pocahontas, which is true. I know it's a political joke these days, but I really am. And I figured the very first time I ever gave blood, had my finger pricked, out it went. Because as you can see, Indian blood is just heavy in my DNA. Well, in my family, we haven't done the DNA test yet because I have a lot of amateur genealogists in my family on both sides. People who are fascinated about where we came from and how we came to be in this country. And so on both sides of my family, I have a pretty extensive family tree. For example, I know that I am related to William Brewster, who was one of the 102 passengers on the Mayflower, arriving in 1620. Just saying. Then there was another strand of my family that came here with the Jamestown settlement in 1607. Just saying. Now, other members of the clan came at different times, and they came for different reasons to this country, and most of my ancestors almost immediately began pushing west because they felt like having a neighbor, even just a mile away, was too close for comfort. Now, some of my family members were well known. Now, this is going to date me a little bit, but like my mother's first husband was a guy named Aaron Spelling. Now, Spelling was a Hollywood producer who gave the world such great TV as Charlie's Angels and Beverly Hills 90210 and the Mod Squad, and I could go on, but modesty prevents me. Yeah, I said he was famous. I didn't say he had good taste, okay? Anyway, that marriage did not last. But most of my family, most of the people on that little family tree, you wouldn't know. They are kept alive in journals and stories that we tell over dinner and over drinks. And when we do that, I realize my family is very much a mixture of saints and sinners. Saints and sinners. For example, I deeply, deeply loved my paternal grandfather. However, I find it very hard to reconcile that with the fact that Granddaddy was a member of the KKK. He was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And somewhere in the family archive, I've seen it, probably have hidden it, is an 8x10 black and white picture of a cluster of Klansmen in robes and in robes. Now, they look identical to me because they're in robes, but someone has helpfully drawn an arrow to a figure on the very back row and labeled it Granddaddy. Granddaddy. Now, by the time I came along, that was in the distant past. Still, that did not resonate with the man I knew. That did not resonate with the way I was raised. You and I both know that families come with baggage. That's one reason I am so grateful for the Feast of All the Saints. We celebrate all the saints of God, the ones who got it right the first time, and the ones like my grandfather, who learn from their mistakes. The text we read today from Ecclesiasticus is read mostly on All Saints. It's the commemoration of our spiritual ancestors, the famous, the not so famous, maybe even the infamous. The Reverend Bob Daniel says, all those wonderful and not so wonderful ancestors of ours have passed down to us a heritage which informs and shapes and challenges. Now, there are two things I want to reflect with you about All Saints. The first reflection is this. I want you to think back. Who influenced your life for good? Who influenced your life for good, for God? Now, sometimes you can learn from a negative experience to say, I don't want to be like that. I'm going to do a 180. I'm not going to be like my family. When I learned of my grandfather's involvement in the KKK, at first I denied it. It couldn't be true. But later, I learned from it. I learned that no one has a right to subjugate another person, to demean them. No one has a right to hold themselves as superior because my skin color is white and another is black. And I learned that God can redeem that experience. It was an echo of what Joseph said to his brothers who sold him into slavery. When at the end of Genesis he said, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. So I ask again for you to think back on who influenced your life for good, for God. And if you would, I would be honored if you would share that story with me. Send me an email. And if that person is still alive, let them know what an influence they have been on you. That would make their day. If some of you are thinking about teachers, look them up. Let them know that English class changed me. Having you sit down and help me with math really opened my eyes. Especially me, because I'm terrible at math, okay? But let them know that they've had an impact on me. Daniel says, pause today and give thanks for that person. Think of one of their virtues and take it on and express it to one another. Like if the person you were thinking of was a person of patience, take that on today and pass it along. The second thing I want us to reflect upon today is that vision of heaven that we have in Revelation. And that was a beautiful reading of Revelation. By the way, here's the picky part. It is Revelation, not Revelations. If you say Revelations, I know you don't know the Bible. And I'm just going to have to, patch you. I think about heaven a lot. I think about heaven a lot. I think about it every day. Not just what it may look like, but I think about who I'll see and what I'll experience. Today, my dad would have been 99 years old. I know. That's amazing. Now, I can no longer imagine him at that age, but I can imagine my Father in heaven. And that's an image I love. And I love the image that St. John gives us of a place where God will wipe away every tear from our eyes. And even as I say these words, I am well aware that I keep using the pronoun I, as if heaven were just me, me, me. But heaven is so much larger, so much bigger than just me or just you. Now maybe we've been programmed to think of heaven in the first person singular because of the question, will you be saved? Will you be saved? Turn that inward and again the questions will become, will I be saved? It's all about me. Well, the answer is, of course, you'll be saved by the saving grace of Jesus Christ, which happens when we say the words, I believe, I believe. Sometimes it happens when we say the words, I believe, Lord, help my unbelief. But that's just the beginning. The continuation of that journey is to be an instrument of bringing and being heaven on earth. John says heaven is a place where people will hunger no more and thirst no more. A few of us in this room know what real hunger and thirst is like. Maybe you've seen a picture that went viral earlier this week of 7-year-old Amal Hussein. She starved to death because of the war in Yemen and a man-made famine. Now, do you hear the lunacy of those words? She died because of a man-made famine. She died because of war and poverty and greed between warring countries. So the question becomes, how can we be an instrument of peace? How can we be an instrument that brings heaven on earth? You and I are not going to go to Yemen. At least most of us aren't. So perhaps it's supporting an organization like Doctors Without Borders, who go to places where we cannot. Perhaps it's simpler. Perhaps it's bringing extra food for our food pantry, filling up that wagon that is just by our front door. Perhaps it's making sure children in Columbia County have food that takes them through the weekend. You know, school lunch on Friday can only take you so far. Wouldn't that be heaven on earth for some children? Now, I want you to go back to that last image in Revelation. Go back to the image of God wiping away every tear from every eye. The hand of God taking a tissue and saying, we're finished with tears here. We're finished with tears here. There's no need for them unless you are crying for joy. How can we be the hand of God to one who is mourning, hurting, or anxious? We don't have to go halfway across the world to find that kind of pain. It's sitting right here. How can we bring heaven on earth to those who mourn? Reflect on that. Think on that. Then act on that. It's not hard. It's not rocket science. All Saints Sunday is a movement between remembrance and thanksgiving in action. So like we just sang, rise up, ye saints of God, have done with lesser things, those lesser things. Give heart and soul and mind and strength to serve the